So I was reading lots of undergraduate dissertations in politics and international relations that were really good, and I realised I was one of probably only 3 people who would get to read this. So I explored the opportunity to develop a journal to give students the chance to publish their work as a journal, which I thought was merited by the quality of the work they were producing. We publish undergraduate research in politics and international relations. I think the way that I define that is it's something that the students have come up with themselves, so it's a question that they've set rather than been set. And normally it's a dissertation, but we don't just publish dissertations. The idea is that you get the opportunity to take your first steps in publishing in journals. So the idea is you submit a piece of work that is based upon your dissertation or upon the research that you've done, but then you make it fit the journal and the journal format. In terms of the publishing, it's aimed at undergraduate students, and I think that's one of the things that, linked to the point about the journal is undergraduate students are kind of the political scientists or the international relations scholars of the future, and this is that opportunity for them to take that first step. And it's also of interest to academic staff and everyone else because of the fact that it's open access. It allows people to see the students' work and to see it for free. So one of the inspirations for the journal was I was an external examiner at a northern university, and I read this dissertation about the politics of street furniture, and I just thought it was some of the best things that I've ever read. And as I was walking back from the university to the station, I was walking through the centre of a northern English town looking at the street furniture and realising the fact that this dissertation had captured something around the nature of the urban landscape, the fact that if you look, you cannot lie down on many seats now in the centre of British towns and cities. That isn't something that's happened by chance. That has been a conscious decision made by political leaders, councils, for whatever reason, and this student captured that in this dissertation. And I was realising that as I was on the train home, I would be one of the only people, apart from the 2 markers, who would read this really brilliant piece of original research. And that sparked me to think that I'd seen lots of that from my students at Leeds over the years. And again, it was something that we in the discipline need to showcase, because these are the researchers of the future, which sounds a little bit kind of over grand, but it's true. And the fact is that if we can encourage those students to publish, they might then think about going into the profession. And I think that's, part of what the journal aims to do. The important thing about the journal is that it has to be your research, and that means that we're looking for things that you have come up with a question or a research topic. The aim of the journal is to replicate the process of publishing in other types of journals, so therefore we're looking at substantial pieces of original research, probably between 6,000 to 10,000 words. We don't just publish dissertations, so one of the things that we'd expect is that you might act on your dissertation feedback, for example, and change some of the way that you've expressed yourself in the piece, that you make sure that you're able to meet the word limit, because again, that's a part of the academic skill. I think the easiest way to explain it is by we're not just publishing dissertations, we're expecting you to think about the work that you have, which may be your dissertation, and turn it into an academic article, which means conforming to the house style, conforming to the word limits, perhaps addressing some of the concerns raised by markers in terms of the way that it is put together, and the journal will then send it out to at least one academic member of staff in another institution who will give you some review, which you will then be expected to tackle and answer before the piece is accepted and published. I work at the University of Leeds. It's one of the White Rose universities, and fortuitously I got to meet people from the press. They struck me as people who would understand what the journal was about. They got it, and I think that was really important. You know, not many places would take a risk on publishing undergraduate research. So the fact that the press was willing to do that took me seriously, understood what the situation was, supported me through the process. So all of that kind of came out from the first meeting, and therefore it made sense to go with the press. I think when we first started the journal, open access was kind of on the fringes of academic publishing. It was something that some people had done, and you were starting to get a little bit of a steer from the library around, but it wasn't something that had a direct impact upon my life. I think obviously working as part of the journal has given me more of an understanding, but that's also mirrored the fact that open access is becoming a more normal route to making your work available. Because it's aimed at publishing student work, the fact that it's freely available, and for the students it's free for them to publish, it means that they have the opportunity to disseminate it quite widely. I think the benefit of working with the press, they're quite a small team, which means that you have a very personal experience. I think Kate and Tom in particular have been fantastic in terms of understanding the pressures. This isn't my job, this is on top of my other jobs, and so they understand that. The advice is always tailored specifically to the journal. It's tailored to help me get the journal out. It's tailored to understand the situation. So all of that, I think, is something that you get from the fact that the press is local, the press is based around the academic activities of the University of Leeds and the other two universities in the White Rose, and that sort of the benefit of working with that sort of small team really stands out. The published version is really, really good. I mean, the way that it sits on the website, the way the website looks, trying to find the way to describe this, it's hard because it is a journal. It's a proper journal that publishes proper research, and I think that was one of my passions as well, is that, again, perhaps it's hard to explain this. You sometimes feel that undergraduate research isn't taken as seriously as it should be. Just because it's done by undergraduate students doesn't mean that it's not valid research. Some of the best research that I've read is by undergraduate students. You know, if it was done by master's students or PhD students, in terms of time, that could be 2 years down the line, people would take it seriously. So I wanted the journal to reflect that, and it does. And I think that means that those articles will also hopefully get cited, because the ones that are good enough are just good academic research. It doesn't matter that it's done by undergraduate students. So we just used to put the PDFs together and then put them on the website. That worked fine. It allowed us to get some dissemination. It was interesting, the fact that some of the journal or the pieces that we put up were actually cited by other academics. So that was really good. But I think that just the nature of the press, the way that it looks, or the nature of the journal, the way it looks, just means that, again, people take it more seriously. You know, you can tell if something is just PDFs on a website, and for right or wrong, that gives you a sense of quality. You infer quality from the fact that there's been time and money spent on the website, on the production process, the way that it looks. all of those sorts of things. And I think that helps reinforce the fact that this is a serious journal, and that should therefore allow the students to sort of be confident that publishing with UJPIR is going to be something that will be good for their careers and good for their CVs. That was one of the unique points I thought about the journal, was the fact that it wasn't just, and there's nothing wrong with this model, it's not just reviewed by students, it was reviewed by academic staff. I think the journal has the same challenges that other journals face, but with a little bit more because of the fact that it is this undergraduate journal. I was reading an editorial the other day that for one journal they went to reviewer 19 to get the reviewers that they need. And that's a really important point. And the call from the editors was that for every article you publish as an academic, 3 or 4 academics have reviewed that. So therefore, if you want peer review to continue, you should review 3 to 4 articles a year, because otherwise the system won't work. And I think that is true for all academic publishing. I think the challenge with this journal is that we want people who understand what the journal's about. It isn't peer review in the sense of what might make a kind of 4-star piece for the ref. This is about understanding that this is encouraging students on their first steps towards academic publishing. It might be the only thing they ever publish, but it's about showcasing the fact that in politics and international relations we get some exceptionally high quality student work, and it feels a shame that it sits on a Turnitin page somewhere rather than getting out and getting into the public realm. Just the personal service, the empathy that's shown to you as an editor, the fact that they're approachable, the fact that they understand the situation. And I think particularly working with Kate, it's that problem solving that she brings. She actually sort of is able to sit there and say to you, have you thought about this? The experience that she brings is incredible. Yes, I think, all of the things that I've said about the quality of the service, the quality of the academic outputs that they produce, and, for a relatively new press, I think they've established a really strong reputation very quickly.